The deficit keeps rising. Washington keeps spending on solar companies that are fizzling. Welcome, everyone. I'm Liz McDonald in for Neil Cavuto. Tonight, subsidies rising, but companies are sinking, and more cylinders could be coming. Government spending to pump up solar energy companies soaring, but those companies still struggling. A new report showing 6 of the top 10 publicly traded solar companies losing money last quarter. My first guess is not surprised. William Yeatman from the Competitive Enterprise Institute says blame Washington for trying to make winners out of potential losers. So, William, make your case here.
Well, I mean, it's quite simple. The government or industries that are dependent upon taxpayer largesse are inherently unsustainable. The problem is when these subsidies become unaffordable and they're rolled back, the jobs on which these subsidies were predicated are lost. So it's actually kind of ironic that green energy, so-called sustainable energy, is inherently unsustainable.
You know, William, this is going to be I think the year that perhaps a voter sits up and pays attention, because what's been going on in Washington, as you point out, it's sort of this kind of field of dreams mentality. Build it, subsidize it, and then the buyers, like the customers, will come. And, you know, it's sort of a piece with Washington, D.C. being as short-sighted as Wall Street when it comes to picking and choosing companies that they think will make it big or worthy of investment. What do you make of that?
Well, if only it were Wall Street making these investments, if only it were the private sector. Instead, we've got the government picking and choosing winners in the energy industry. And that's a problem because politics always gets involved. If it's not a congressman trying to satisfy a constituent, it's the president and his administration trying to satisfy a campaign donor. So these are always conducive. These sorts of political machinations are always conducive towards poor investments, poor decision-making, which is why we've had this raft of bankruptcies and failures of these stimulus-funded companies.
Right, and we've got 7 solar companies either filing bankruptcy or insolvent in the last several months. 6 of the top 10 have debt that surpasses their market cap. But here's a deal for taxpayers and voters out there, William. States here in this country, out of the 50 states, there are a large number of them who are mandating basically green energy through their own utilities in their own state borders. Certainly California does that. Isn't that a worry?
Well, I'll tell you, of course it is a worry that so many states, I believe it is 34 states all told, have enacted these Soviet-style production quotas for green energy, for expensive intermittent energy. That's problematic in and of itself, but it begs the question, why do industries that have a guaranteed source of demand, in other words, they've got these Soviet-style production quotas, why do they warrant subsidies? Well, why are we subsidizing the production on top of guaranteeing demand? It doesn't make any sense.
All right, William, what's going on here is that prices are essentially dropping, meaning the prices for the materials to make solar panels, even to make the factories to make the solar panels, all those prices are dropping. We know that China's been undercutting the market. Where can the solar industry succeed? We know that it's better to let the market show the world what will work. Where do you think the winners are in the solar industry?
I don't see any winners for a technology that is intermittent and expensive vis-a-vis conventional energy. This is an industry that would not exist were it not for political favoritism. I see nothing beneficial there. They're forcing people to use, the states are, and the federal government is subsidizing it, these expensive intermittent sources of energy, and we're eschewing these affordable, reliable, conventional sources of energy.
Right, and this has been an issue for the U.S. government. They've been pushing for solar energy since the early 70s. And, you know, some would argue that, look, this country the government does subsidize certain companies, certain sectors, certainly the defense industry, and the government essentially helped and aided in creating the Internet. But solar never seemed to fly and never seemed to be able to get off the ground. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, first, I'd like to qualify. The government in no way created the Internet. I mean, there was some research. Well, helped create it. Well, precisely. But it required the private sector. It required the profit motive to make the Internet what we know what we know today. But I think you hit the nail on the head at the beginning when you said that the solar industry has always been the energy of the future. It's been 40 years of subsidies, and they always say just extend our tax cut for 5 more years. Well, we just need a few more years of generous taxpayer handouts before we become viable, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, it's 40 years and all that money, billions down the rat hole.
All right, William Yeatman with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. So good to be with you tonight, sir. Thank you so much for your time.